I was bitten by a deer as a kid. Just because your DJI app says that you can fly in a location,
not true.
It is not necessarily true.
Like, you get out into the wilderness to enjoy the wilderness, and all of a sudden you hear,
If you want to take off land in the provincial or national park, you will need to get permission from that park's authority. So you hop off the plane at YVR with your drone and your cardigan. Within 3 hours, you can be in the Canadian wilderness taking some great nature shots. But you want to do it safely, legally, and not get eaten by a bear. Today on Coastal Drone Weekly Live, we're going to talk about how to safely and legally fly your drone in the wilderness and not get eaten by a bear.
okay, let's do it.
Let's do it. So we're going to talk about some of the... We're going to start boring and then get interesting. We're going to start boring by just briefly going over some of the regulatory
Stick
requirements.
with us here, please.
We're gonna start with the regulations and just make sure that we're all flying legally, and then we're gonna talk about flying safely and some considerations for flying in the wilderness and some of the applications for use for wilderness photography. If you are someone coming to Canada, maybe for the first time, maybe for the 100th time, and you're looking to fly your drone in the wilderness, in the woods, there's a lot of wilderness here in Canada.
It's about 99% backcountry.
Exactly. So how can we safely and legally get footage of nature? Well, straight off the bat, we've talked about this many times before on our channel. If your drone weighs over 250 grams, what do you need, Ian?
Pilot
You
certificate.
need either a basic or an advanced pilot certificate. So we've talked about when you need a basic, when you need an advanced. For most wilderness operations, it's most likely in Class G away from people, so it would be most likely a basic certificate, but you do need a pilot certificate. The other thing that you're going to need, if you are not a Canadian citizen or permanent resident, you also require a foreign operator special flight operations certificate. Now, this is for the foreign operator certificate. There's different types of SFOCs, special flight operations certificate. For the foreign operator one, it's actually quite simple to get. There's one form to fill out. You send it via email to Transport Canada. You need to allow at least, though, for 30 business days for it to be completed. You also need to hold your basic certificate minimum before you apply for the SFOC. Now, you don't need to be in Canada to obtain your basic certificate. It is done via an online test. So you can write the online test, send in your form for your SFOC, and if they require additional documentation from you, they will request that additional documentation. Otherwise, you should be good to go to get your SFOC.
For the basic.
For the basic.
And let's be realistic about this. If we're talking about wilderness operations here, pretty good chance you can get away with a basic.
Most of the wilderness in Canada is uncontrolled airspace. You do not require a advanced certificate for uncontrolled airspace operations.
Yeah, so this is one of the situations where we'd actually recommend starting with the basic to keep things simple.
Though, before you come to Canada, do take a look at one of the available maps so you don't get caught when you're here.
Yeah, because just to make it clear, more than 5.6 kilometers away from a certified aerodrome or an airport outside of controlled airspace, so A through to E airspace, and more than 100 feet away horizontally from bystanders that are not involved. And that's probably the most likely one that you're going to have to manage is avoiding people.
Ian, does a moose count as a bystander?
It depends on how many antlers and if it's bipedal or not.
So
I know some people that could be called a moose.
So the one thing you do have to be careful about, though, if you are a foreign pilot coming to Canada, are provincial and national parks.
Yeah.
So the takeoff and landing of aircraft in national parks or national park reserves may only take place at prescribed locations. So in Canada, it's similar to the United States system where there are state parks and then national parks. We have a similar system here in Canada where there is federally administered national parks and then provincially administered provincial parks.
We also have regional district parks as well. So like Greater Vancouver Regional District, other municipalities as well.
And municipal parks as well. But we're talking here for like wilderness operations, most likely you'd be engaging with either the National Parks Board or the Provincial Parks Board. This is the National Parks Board. They say that it can only take place at prescribed locations. Then you go on your website to look for the prescribed locations, and it says you cannot take or land an aircraft in a national park without a restricted activity permit from Parks Canada, which is our federal parks administration.
Mm-hmm.
So if you are looking to do some sort of any drone operation within the national park, you'll need to get this this permit from the National Park Board. For provincial parks, it varies province to province how to achieve that permission, but it is a similar system. I know in BC and Alberta, it's similar.
Yeah.
You need to request from the provincial park. Have you ever tried to get permission for a federal provincial park?
Yes, for federal, but not for drones, for helicopters. And in that case, it was an email chain back and forth with one of the administrators. It was up in Wood Buffalo National Park.
Yeah, so that normally, so if you want to take off land in the provincial or national park, you will need to get permission from that park's authority. Now, from what we have heard and what we can gather and looking at various websites, they most likely will not issue a permit for non-commercial work.
That's right.
So if it's just recreational, if you're just here as a tourist, most likely avoid the provincial or national parks.
Yeah, the conversation is pretty much going to end here on that side.
Yeah. If you're here to do some sort of research or commercial photography, then that's a different story.
And of course, give yourself way more than 30 days
Absolutely.
to do that process.
Now, we are not trying to dissuade you. There is more wilderness in Canada than what is just contained in our park system. There's a lot of Canada. If you fly your drone in the national park, the maximum fine is $25,000, and they have actually applied this fine before.
Well, and that's per instance.
Per instance.
Right. So they could say, well, every time you took off and we caught you, it was, or they could compound it.
Yeah. So, but what I'm saying is this has happened before, and they did not go easy on the person that did it. They applied the full penalty to this person.
Yeah, it was in Jasper
during a forest fire.
Yeah, there were some compounding issues there.
There was a lot of issues with that flight, but they did apply the maximum penalty.
Yes.
So let's say that it's some sort of wilderness, but it is not like a national or provincial park. Good to go?
You call it Crown Land.
Yes. In Canada, it is called the Crown Land. In Canada, within British Columbia, Crown Land, it is administered by the province. Everywhere else in Canada, it is administered federally. And you are allowed to take off and land in that area.
Yeah.
As long as you also have the appropriate airspace permission, if it is controlled airspace. Some of the things to look out for if you just drive outside of the city in Canada, it can be a little bit unclear what land is what land. It is a good idea to look on Google Maps to see if there's any administrative areas around those. In Canada, towns can extend beyond into wilderness areas around their towns. And the other one to look out for is Canada has, much similar to the United States, Canada has a system of indigenous reservations, which you are not allowed to trespass onto for the purposes of taking off or landing an aircraft. And then also look out, and if it looks like it could be someone's private property, don't trespass onto someone's private property. Yeah.
So Google Earth, there's multiple different layers, and what's it called? The annotated one it's white as a base layer. That layer is pretty good at identifying park layers on it because it's easier to like on the terrain mode, it's green and then green on green. So it's difficult to see. In BC, we have the GIS map database. So there's the BC Geographic Information System, and they've got a really good KML or overlay file that you can grab that shows you where all the park boundaries are in BC, which you could also load into Google Earth and take with you. There's other map sources like Backroad Map Books. There's Avenza. You can use PDF map files. You want to have something with you that, of course, is most likely going to be available offline as well. That's one of the big problems you're going to face in the woods.
Yeah, exactly. So, there's a lot of people in Canada, like people who live in Canada, they like to do stuff outside of the national parks because you have a little bit more flexibility on what you can and can't do. So there is resources available for people who do like either backcountry skiing or overlanding or things like this. So these are resources that you can also look for if your primary goal is to avoid provincial and federal parks, which is a good primary goal. Because
that's kind of the point of why they're established.
Exactly.
Yeah.
When you are in a wilderness area, you must exercise good judgment. So don't fly near wildlife or protected areas. Try to maintain line of sight. If the drone is over 250 grams, you must maintain line of sight. If it is a micro drone, it is a best practice to keep that aircraft within line of sight. Be conscious of branches or obstacles that could obstruct your vision or signal, and bears.
Predator wildlife definitely is going to be a thing. Of course, if your focus is on the drone, your situational awareness of your surroundings may not be as good. So then that's when there's a reality of it happening in the woods.
So this brings up a question. Is Canadian wildlife friendly? Can you, if you are a single person in the woods, what is the likelihood that you will die? There are some general rules for animals. Don't approach wild animals in the wild. People do this all the time. I think it's in at Yellowstone in the States. At the geyser there, because buffalo or bison always get onto the roads, and then people approach them and then get headbutt.
Yeah, well, people get gored by moose in Alberta in the ice fields as well, right?
I've been bitten by a deer. So, if the question is
this where this is all coming from? Do you have something to say? Do we some trauma sharing here? You're gonna dump some deer trauma.
Yeah, I was bitten by a deer as a kid, and that has made me the person I am today. If you see an animal, it is best to land the aircraft. You don't necessarily know how that animal is going to react around that aircraft. We have a whole video on our channel about interactions with birds and other animals.
It's similar with mammals, right? It's a high frequency noise that could be irritating to them, and you don't want to spook them.
Yes. If your drone does encounter either a bird strike or an animal strike, you have to file an incident report to Transport Canada.
So don't strike them.
You can use a visual observer to help you look for animals. That could be part of their visual observer duty.
I'm probably going to jump off topic, but I just thought of this, and I'm not sure I saw it in our slides. What are the regulations around drones and hunting?
Specific, like, can you use a drone to hunt?
Yeah. Well, in general. So I'm not sure. Have we talked about this before?
No, we have not.
Okay. So very, very, very strict. You cannot have a drone if you intend to go hunting. If you have...
is that in the cars or is that like game law?
It's a game law. So if you intend to go hunting and you have firearms and your tags and your core for the season, you cannot, if you have a drone in the truck, for example, I'm going to get this wrong, but it's the idea is it's called pit lamping or something like that. And I'm not a hunter. Like, I grew up with firearms and everything else, but I've never really got my core or anything. But the idea is you're creating an unfair advantage. So when you're flying helicopters, for example, if you fly over and see game, you cannot land there for 24 hours because now you've got an unfair advantage on that game. Same with drones. You cannot use a drone to go and look for game that you plan to hunt, to the point where you can't even... This might be an extreme exaggeration, but my understanding was like you can't even take it to the lodge with you. So if you go somewhere and then your drone is nearby, sorry, it's not fisheries, it's game enforcement. They will levy fines against you.
Yeah, and the only way to prove that would be to like connect to DJI and prove that you didn't take off or land. But even then,
the burden of proof isn't. I don't think it's one of those things where it becomes like pretty tenuous.
Yeah.
Right? And so Boyko's got a point here. Per the hunting synopsis, to operate, possess, or use information that a drone obtains during a hunting expedition or less than 6 hours before the before the start of a hunt or trapping. So you can't use a drone fewer than 6 hours before the start. So he's saying you can have it, but you can't use it within 6 hours in British Columbia. So that would be a hard one to prove that you didn't use it if it's in your truck while you head out of town.
Yeah.
So I think that's where that was coming from. And that's all anecdotal, the points I was raising. So that's good. We'll add some stuff in the link, obviously, and talk about it further.
So that's humans hunting animals, animals hunting humans. Canada will kill you.
If it's not the animals, it's the taxes.
Come on.
Or the housing market. It's election season
that
in
is
BC
true.
right now.
That is true. Take normal wilderness survival precautions for the Canadian wilderness. Mm-hmm. One of the reasons why people sometimes get into trouble in Canada is the wilderness is like a 1 hour drive from Vancouver. Mm-hmm. This is how people get into trouble backcountry skiing is they land at YVR. They think that they can just drive into the backcountry.
Yeah.
Maybe they're from maybe they're from a place.
Anywhere.
Yeah, maybe they're from. Well, I was
Urban.
thinking
urban.
of somewhere more urban or somewhere where there's not as where like the backcountry isn't as extensive as it is here.
Yeah.
There are places in the world like other skiing areas in the world where the backcountry exists but is not as extensive as the Canadian wilderness. Someone
True.
gets lost. The risk of avalanche in Canada is quite high most of the time. And so you need to take if you are taking your drone into the wilderness, you must take the wilderness seriously.
Mm-hmm.
Some tips. This is from the Northwest Territories website on wilderness survival. These are just some general tips. In the event of an emergency, do not panic.
So you should take the Hitchhiker's Guide with you then.
The book?
Yes, the Douglas Adams book.
Very good. I've never read it. Ian's parents were English teachers, so my lack of literature knowledge is constantly killing him.
The use of an Oxford commas.
My use of Oxford commas. I will not quote The Vampire Weekend because this is a family-friendly show. You must manage your fatigue. Always make sure you have equipment to start a fire, especially in the winter. Please don't set our forest on fire during the summer, but have equipment.
How about just year round? Please
Yes.
don't.
Yes, please don't set our forest on fire. And then bring a first aid kit. Here are some. This is also again for the Northwest Territories. Here's what they recommend. So bandages, ointment, bug repellent is a big one.
The bugs will carry you away.
Yes, Winnipeg has mosquitoes the size of Volkswagen Beetles. Compasses, flashlights, water, garbage bags, mirror, high energy snacks with like a Cliff Bar, a lightweight blanket, a map, and it should be a map that you can access without the internet. Matches in a waterproof container, some cord, plastic food bags, a pocket knife, something to purify water, and a whistle to alert people to where you are. I didn't put this in the slides, but if you do become lost in the wilderness with your drone,
Use your drone.
use your drone. But the other thing is, if you are lost, it is always a best practice to stay where you are. You will expend less energy. You will be able to keep yourself warmer, and it will be easier for people to find you if you stay where you are.
Yeah.
Most of the time, if people do keep walking, they keep walking farther and farther out into the bush.
Or potentially in circles.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's more common to walk in circles and not realize you are, especially if you have no kind of basic bearing on what direction you're looking at. So
every tree in this country looks exactly the same.
yeah, but the sun sets in one direction and rises in the other. So
Why are people interested in flying drones in the Canadian wilderness?
because of our diverse flora and fauna.
Exactly. So some applications for wilderness: search and rescue for when you get lost in the woods.
So when you get out and lose your drone
Yes.
or lose yourself and then find yourself with your own drone. Well, at least I know where I am.
Exactly. Well, actually, your drone should have a GPS on it.
Yeah, you're going to get your lat long out of it. That's a
Yes.
good point.
Yeah.
If you dig into your settings.
And
But
then
who are you going to tell it to?
Well, if you've got a map, then you could potentially find your lat long on the map and then figure it out. But that would be a high skill maneuver, as I would say.
Or you could just fly up to 2,000 feet with your drone and take a picture. Now you've got a photo map on your controller until your controller dies.
Yeah, exactly. But Ian was mentioning our diverse flora and fauna, so wildlife and environmental research, and also filmmaking, adventure filmmaking.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So,
Quite a bit of like game, well, not game movement, but just, general animal and nature movements are being used by drones for tracking, looking for trails, right?
So that's a little bit about if you are from not Canada and want to fly in, yes, Canada.
Yeah. So you need a foreign pilot SFOC if you're visiting Canada.
Basic.
Well, you said foreign operator. Has the name changed or?
I think it's foreign operator SFOC.
Okay. So yeah, foreign operator SFOC if you're visiting Canada and you're not a permanent resident or a citizen. Give yourself 30 business days.
If the drone is over 250 grams, if it is a micro drone, this is not required.
Exactly. So DJI Mini 3 Pro, Mini 4 Pro, Mini 4K. As long as you're using the smaller batteries for the 3s and the 4s, no prop guards, no extra weight
Stock,
adders.
straight from the box.
Yeah, which is honestly the best way to go realistically when you're traveling anyway. The sub 250 is going to create, well, obviously it's going to take less space in your bag, right? The cost of the drone is lower. So when you go out and fly over that glassy lake at less than 10 feet and the drone lands in the lake and you need to go buy another one, it's not as painful.
Or when a certain airline based out of SeaTac Airport doesn't put your girlfriend's bag on the plane when you're changing and flying to Vancouver, and it takes them 3 days to get it to her. I was recently on holiday.
Was it a blue globe with gold letters?
No, it was there was like a guy.
Oh, okay. A guy. All right, sure. Yeah, so if you lost it, that's a big part. I know you've talked about this. We've talked about traveling in the past, but of course, coming to Canada or anywhere else, if you're flying with a drone, it has to be in your carry-on baggage.
Yes, do not put your lipos. You can put the drone body in your checked bag. I wouldn't do that if I were you.
No, it's going to get crushed.
It will get crushed, but you cannot put your lipos in your checked bag.
Yeah, so any batteries, lithium batteries, must be in your carry-on.
Yeah, that's right, because they will explode.
Yeah. You need to treat them like grenades.
And then make sure when you are flying in Canada that you are in somewhere that is not impermissible to fly.
Yeah.
And then if
the only one we didn't really talk about is also it's not really no-fly zones, but restricted airspace. So regardless of the size of drone you fly, there are airspace out there in Canada in the wilderness that is restricted.
Yes.
There's 2 reasons why. There's a lot of prisons in Canada that are out in the middle of nowhere for higher security reasons. And then there's also military training areas out in the wilderness away from municipalities.
Yes.
And both of those have CYR or Class F restricted airspace surrounding them.
So there is a big Class F restricted for F-35 training here in BC. However, I believe it begins at 13,000 feet ASL.
Yeah. But there is low level stuff as well as to the surface.
There is also low level stuff. There's actually a low level one in the Salish Sea between Vancouver and Nanaimo. There is a CYR that extends surface to 1,000 feet.
That's the submarine testing and training area.
Yes, and there's an island in that area, and also you can take your boat there. So
yeah. So east of Fraser Valley, there's a bunch of prisons in the middle of nowhere. It's all Class G airspace surrounding them, but then there's Class F restricted airspace. Do not want to be operating a drone in that area.
No.
Lots of criminal code fines that can apply. And then, there's a bunch of military training areas. There's ranges, there's testing areas, there's practice areas. Those are all restricted as well.
Yes.
So how do you find that stuff?
You would need to check on map.navdrone.ca.
Yeah. So the NavDrone map tool, you don't even need to have a login or a password to get into it. You can use the map tool. You can even use the app on your phone without logging in. You can skip the login to go to the map view.
This planning, making sure that you know where you can and can't fly, this should be done before you're on site.
Yeah. You're going to need cell reception.
You're going to need cell reception, and honestly, it might take you a couple hours to figure out everything if you're unfamiliar with Canadian airspace. So make sure that you're doing this planning before you come to Canada.
And Maya's bringing up a good point here. So she's like, what are the requirements on not harassing wildlife with your drone? There's probably a hard and fast minimum distance.
The new version of the AIM goes specifically and talks about the the Wildlife Act.
Yeah.
I know for marine animals, there's an act by the Department of Fisheries and Oceans.
That's correct.
That states that you can't overfly marine mammals by a certain distance without permission.
Yeah, and again, this is from top of my head. I think it's 1,000 feet minimum altitude, and it's over 1,000 meters horizontal distance.
Yeah. So when we say marine mammals, we mean like orca whales or
cephalopods
or something like this. Yeah.
No, that's cephalopods aren't whales.
No, those are octopuses.
Yeah.
When Ian goes to the beach, you cannot overfly him.
I'm an octopus. I'm very squishy.
I guess the takeaway, if you are a non-Canadian, is the thing that we always deal with as Canadians is that there's a patchwork of organizations and regulatory bodies that
lots of rules from different
lots
groups.
Of rules from different groups, and you need to be aware of these before you do any drone operation.
Yeah, yeah, and good story here. Like of all places, I was 22 2018 or 2019, I was at Haleakala crater in Hawaii. And you drive up to the summit at 10,000 plus feet to catch a sunrise at 4 o'clock in the morning. It's dead silent. We're standing there, and all of a sudden I hear, doo-doo-doo. Someone's fired up a Mavic 2 Pro, and they're about to launch. And I look over and I give him the stare that it's like, are you seriously going to do that right now? Yeah. And so now it flies up to 400 feet above us or whatever, and he just has it sitting there stationary. He's probably doing a time lapse. Cool idea. Terrible location, terrible choice to do it. It's a national park. It's like Haleakala Crater is a federal national park. So first off there.
Yeah.
Second off, he's flying over people.
That's
he's immediately directly over top of us.
That's on Big Island, right?
Maui.
Okay.
Maui. And also it's now up there for 20 minutes or whatever. We're at 10,000 feet. So I don't know like what the battery life and performance, I can't remember what the Mavic 2 Pro is, but I know you're in a high elevation environment at this point. And all you hear is this buzzing for 20 straight minutes.
It's like, dude, shut up.
I know. So I go over to him. I finally, like, I'm not a confrontational person. I'm like, look, you can't, I'm 99.9% sure you can't fly that thing here right now. Oh, well, the app says it was okay. All right, fine. I'm not going to push this further. But, right, like, and it's sad. Like, there was no park ranger or anything around or anything. Like, it's a really busy spot.
Mm-hmm. One of the things to take away from this, though, is just because your DJI app says that you can fly in a location,
Not true.
it is not necessarily true. Yeah. So you need to also check the relevant official, because the DJI app, at the end of the day, is technically an unofficial resource for airspace and grounds.
It's meant to fit every nationality,
so
every country in the world.
So you need to check official sources before you take off. We've talked about this before. The official sources in Canada are the NRC Site Selection Tool, map.navdrone.ca, and VTAs and VNCs and other mapping products provided by Nav Canada. So patchwork of organizations in Canada, our air traffic services and airspace mapping is provided by a private company called Nav Canada.
Private, not-for-profit.
Private, not-for-profit.
Sort of semi-private. Yeah. They're the air navigation service provider for Canada.
Yes.
Who said drones are easy?
Well, the sticks are easy.
Yeah, the flying part's great.
Flying part's great.
Especially now, like, so the DJI Air 3S launched yesterday, right? So now it has LiDAR forward-facing collision, so it can basically see trees in the dark. It has one really cool feature also that came out of it, is it apparently now will build its own real-time point cloud. So as it's flying along, it's either using the LiDAR or it's using the vision system to build a real-time point cloud of the area it's flying, so that when you need to return to home, it knows where home is, even in a GPS-denied environment. So yeah, things are getting easier and easier and easier. So and this is the Air 3S is marketed as a travel drone, right? It's for traveling creators. So it's smaller, more compact. It's not under the 250 gram rule in Canada, so it's not as easy to fly, but it's under 900 grams, which is a major weight milestone in Europe for like the C1 rating, right? So C0 is under that, C1 is up to 900 grams, and that kind of limits where you can and can't fly in Europe. So yeah, the technology is getting easier and easier and easier to fly these things. Like you think about even 5 years ago, you'd be probably flying a Phantom 3 or Phantom 4 and trying to pack that when you travel and go visit somewhere. So now you've got this cube of commitment that you need to carry with you everywhere, that's got the drone and then the batteries. And then the batteries are huge and obtuse and everything else. Now you've got a bag this big, and you've got something that can shoot at 4K at up to 120 frames a second now in log. So it's never been a better time to get out and fly and create these incredible images. But the point is, just know what you're getting yourself into when it comes to regulations, and also not ruining it for everyone else around you. Like, you get out into the wilderness to enjoy the wilderness, right? You get out there to enjoy silence. And all of a sudden you hear drone flying by at 60 miles an hour, whatever the top speed is of them now is. That's not that great.
No, it really isn't. And it's not that great for the animals that live there either.
That's right.
Well, thank you very much for joining us today on this episode of Coastal Drone Weekly. I've been Finn, and here with Ian, and Cam is behind the board. If you've enjoyed this video and want to see more like it, you can hit the like and subscribe button. Otherwise, we shall see you next time.
And next week, we're going to be interviewing live in the studio Pixel Sky Animations, where we're talking to them about live drone shows. They have something like 500 drones that they take off all at once. So we're going to be talking about multiple drone SFOCs, over people, advertised events, the technology and the crazy logistics that's required to get that to work. And so we're going to have them on live next week for our next episode. So we'll see you then.
Sounds good.
Bye.
See ya.